Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to speak with us today and with our special guests, our elected officials. My name is Brenna Landis, and I am a 3L law student at Loyola College of Law in New Orleans, and myself and my lab partner, Carrie Ducote, are in law school together, and we formed Louisiana Utility Watchdog as a campaign to promote transparency, accountability, and accessibility for public participation at the Louisiana Public Service Commission. And we're working in coordination with the Alliance for Affordable Energy. We're actually interning with them this semester. And I will let Carrie introduce our special guests.
Hi, yes. Hello, everyone. Like my partner said, my name is Carrie Ann Ducote. I too am a Loyola Law student, and I am honored to be presenting our two special guests today, State Representative Matthew Willard and Louisiana Public Commissioner Devontae Lewis. Devontae Lewis was born and raised in Lake Charles, Louisiana, is a social justice activist who has dedicated his life to building people power throughout civic participation. Devontae graduated from McNeese State University with a BA in political science and a minor in communications. While at McNeese, Devontae served as a two-term student body president, chair of the Louisiana Council of Student Body Presidents, and a member of the University of Louisiana System Board of Supervisors. After graduation, Devontae continued to be a champion for young people as a public school teacher who led programs to enhance positive behavior systems and promote positive relationships between teachers and students. Taking his advocacy beyond the classroom, Devontae joined the Louisiana Budget Project as Director of Public Affairs and Outreach, where he focuses on higher education policy, consumer protection policies, monitoring legislative developments, and working with advocacy groups and coalition partners to forge a common agenda and action plan for advancing policies that benefit Louisianians with low and moderate incomes. At LBP, Devontae has become a leading voice in Louisiana for economic and racial justice, consumer protections, equity in education, and financial aid and student loan reforms for students. Devontae's policy advocacy has been recognized at the national level. Devontae served as the co-chair of the Outreach and Campaigns Advisory Committee for the State Priorities Partnership, a network of state agency organizations advancing policies that benefit people with low income, and was elected the chair of SPP's steering committee. He is a sought-after speaker and consultant on policy advocacy and community engagement. Devontae was elected in 2022 to serve as Louisiana Public Service Commissioner for Louisiana's 3rd District, representing constituents from 10 Louisiana parishes, including Baton Rouge and the Greater New Orleans metropolitan areas. He currently resides in Baton Rouge with his beloved dog, Sarah Harper. And my own personal comment, he has quite the fashion sense. So everyone, please welcome Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Lewis, you want to give a little wave for us so everybody can see you? Next, I would like to present our state representative, Matthew Willard. Matthew Willard is Louisiana State Representative for District 97, which includes Gentilly, Mid-City, and Bayou St. John neighborhoods in New Orleans. He serves on the Ways and Means, Insurance and Municipal, Parochial and Cultural Affairs Committees in the House of Representatives. Matthew is also the chairperson for the STEM Innovation Caucus, vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus, and a graduate of Jesuit High School and the University of New Orleans. Matthew is the Marketing and Communications Director at Fluence Analytics, a technology startup that provides continuous analytics and process control solutions for the polymer and biopharmaceutical industries. With innovative strategies and strong interpersonal skills, Matthew guides the company's overall marketing direction and manages business development initiatives and communication policies. Most notably, Matthew led the successful public relations campaigns following the company's 3 venture capital funding rounds. He also spearheaded a comprehensive company rebrand in 2017. In 2018, he received the certification of Scrum Master and helped implement and lead an agile company-wide project management framework. He was honored by Gambit New Orleans in 2019 and as a 40 under 40 leader in New Orleans, and has received multiple awards for his social advocacy and economic development initiatives in the legislature. Matthew is an elected member of the Orleans Parish Democratic Executive Committee, serves as the treasurer of the Gentilly Development District, and is a parishioner of St. Raymond and St. Leo the Great Catholic Church. So please help me welcome State Representative Matthew Willard. If you can give a wave. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking times out of your busy schedules to be here today. And now I'd like to hand it back off to my partner, Brenna, to kind of give everyone the rundown of the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you, Commissioner Lewis and Representative Willard, for being with us here today. I just want to announce and remind everyone that this event is being recorded right now. Excuse me. We will send the recording out as a follow-up email with a summary of the meeting. And just a reminder that this is a community dialogue to submit respectful questions on topic. We want to have a productive and positive meeting today where we can all learn how we can cooperate together to bring greater transparency and accountability to our utility regulation at the Public Service Commission. I also want to say Emma from the Alliance should have just dropped a link for the questions in the Zoom chat. So if you have a question right off the bat, go ahead and click that link and you can put your name down and put your question down, and we will get to them in the order that they are received after our introductory presentation. So as far as the agenda for our meeting today, Carrie and I will start with a foundational presentation on the issues that we have researched this semester. Then Jackson will give an introduction to the Alliance. We'll pause for a reaction from the group, and then we'll have some reactions from our elected officials. Then we'll talk about what you can do today to help push our campaign forward and create greater transparency at the Public Service Commission. And then we'll kind of open up the floor for community dialogue at the second half of our meeting today. So thank you so much for being here. And Carrie and I will go ahead and talk about our issues that we've been hard at work on. Thank you.
Yes, one moment as I share my screen. All right, let's see. Can everybody see this? Well, a few head nods. Yes. Okay, great. So I would like to start with the big question we all have. Why is our power bill so high? And in order to do that, I need to start with the Securitization Act of 2005. This act allows for storm recovery costs to be supported through a security process. Particularly, companies like Entergy are able to sell security shares, such as bonds, to finance improving infrastructure damage from hurricanes. These loans are then backed by customer billings, and thus far, 100% of the cost has been on the public, resulting in higher energy bills. And I like to bring attention to some big numbers, as you can see on the screen. Entergy is currently shifting another $1.5 billion in storm costs to customers on top of the original $3.2 billion that they were already approved for last year. This is totaling in $4.7 billion being shifted to customers, and it's estimated that it'll take over 15 years for us to pay that off. Now, who's an organization that can help us with this? That would be the Louisiana Public Service Commission. Every state has a Public Service Commission, which has regulatory authority over utilities. But it's important to note that that's not the only thing that they regulate. They also determine how much utility companies can profit, where your power comes from, and if and how much you can benefit from solar energy on your home. I like to note that these are some very powerful positions, and it is important to also note that they are allowed to accept campaign contributions from the very utility companies they are meant to regulate. Now, the Louisiana Utility Watchdogs, Brenna and I, are not the only ones pushing for change. The Alliance for Affordable Energy has been our consumer advocacy organization for much longer. Most states have organizations like this that are supported by state allocated funds, but the Alliance for Affordable Energy does not receive any funding from the city or state. However, it is important to note that since their founding, their actions have resulted in over $4 billion in direct savings to Louisiana residents. Now I'll hand it off to my partner, Brenna.
Thanks, Carrie. Hi, everyone. So my focus this semester has been on structural and procedural change at the Louisiana Public Service Commission. And really what we want to do is put the public's voice into the Public Service Commission. Carrie, if you could go to the next slide, please.
Technical difficulties, one moment.
So the entire purpose of the Louisiana Public Service Commission is to serve the public interest. And they do this by working with consumers and the public and interested parties and the utilities and creating reliable and reasonably priced services. There are 5 elected commissioners who have basically the final say on how much utilities can charge customers for electricity in the state of Louisiana. And the commission is actually essentially unchecked by any other branch of state government. So we must all work together to modernize the Louisiana Public Service Commission because we need transparent, accountable, and accessible public participation. So currently, the Louisiana Public Service Commission, Carrie, if you could go to the next slide, please. They are a separate constitutionally established body under the executive branch, and they are really only accountable to the Louisiana Supreme Court. And that's if you have the resources to bring a case all the way up to the Supreme Court. So really, they set our rates that the utilities are allowed to charge their customers. Next slide, please. So the Securitization Act really is an example of this systemic issue at play here. There was actually a quote from Commissioner Campbell in the meeting from last December, where he said, you know, we really relied on the utilities' voice in making this decision to transfer this $4.7 billion to their customers because they have the largest voice in the room. And so since Hurricane Katrina, since 2005, the Public Service Commission has allowed Entergy to transfer these costs, 100% of these costs, to their customers. And the reason why that has happened is because there is no procedural or structural public participation tool in place at the Louisiana Public Service Commission. So we're trying to work together with our legislature, with our public service commissioners, and the public, everyone here in this room today, and at large, to advocate for a procedural change at the Louisiana Public Service Commission. And so that is a general overview of our the issues that we focused on this semester. And I will let Jackson speak a little bit about the Alliance and their work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brenna and Carrie. And I just also want to thank you again for all the work you've done for us in the last few months. The Louisiana Watchdog, Utility Watchdog, has been I think, a successful project, as evidenced by all the people who joined us here today. So just really quickly, I think that Carrie and Brenna have actually provided a pretty good overview of what we do here at the Alliance. But we are, once again, to reiterate, the energy consumer watchdog for the state of Louisiana. And a lot of our work focuses on ensuring that ratepayers in Louisiana are put first in decisions made by the Public Service Commission and the New Orleans City Council. And I also just want to mention very quickly, we're having a discussion that's really more statewide in focus, and that's why we have a state legislator and Commissioner Lewis here. But this is also something that, obviously, if you're joining us today from New Orleans, you know that your regulator is actually the New Orleans City Council. But with that in mind, the decisions that are being made by, say, Entergy Louisiana and are approved by the Public Service Commission have a profound effect on what the New Orleans City Council is actually able to do. And so it's important for us to have this discussion wherever you are in the state, regardless of who actually regulates your particular version of Entergy or particular utility. And so hopefully we'll have a really robust discussion about what we need to be doing to make sure that this process is something that everybody's able to participate in, not just organizations like ours, and how we can empower and work with our elected officials like Representative Willard and Commissioner Lewis to make that happen. So excited for the discussion we're going to have. Excited to hear from our elected officials in just a moment as well. And I think it's going to be a good event today. So thank you so much for coming.
Okay, so it looks like we had a little issue with our initial link to questions, but we just put an updated link in the chat. So we're gonna go ahead and give y'all some time to go ahead and enter any questions you may have into that. And while we do that, I would like to take this moment to get reactions from our representatives, Commissioner Lewis and Representative Willard. At this point, what do you think about what we have discussed thus far?
Devontae, you want to go first?
Sure. I'll go first. Well, thank you all for the work that you've been doing, of course, the work of the Alliance, and then for all of the community members who have joined. I mean, I think this is a very important topic and something that we have to discuss. I mean, I've been on the commission now just a little over 80 days, and my first meeting was a vote on securitization. So this has not been an easy route because I jumped straight into it. And so I think the conversations about storm damage and recovery is going to be a major topic. And I think oftentimes, as you mentioned in your presentation, how my body is unique in its constitutional creation. A lot of times, if we're not paying attention to what my friend Representative Willard and others are doing at the Capitol, there are indirect things that are applying to the decisions that we make. And so I think it is really appreciative how you took the holistic view, right? And that you're not only talking about what happens at the Public Service Commission, but how things that happen in the executive branch and the legislative branch dictate or complement or hinder the work that we are doing. And so I think this is the big question for us going forward. As we know, we'll probably have another hurricane in the next few years if this process makes sense for the people of Louisiana. So I'm really eager and engaged about how we have broader conversations and a better sense of governance that includes people and not just kind of the utility companies, the bonding agencies, and governmental officials in these conversations about restoration and recovery. So that's kind of my quick thoughts on the great work that you've been able to do thus far.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Lewis. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matthew Willard, State Representative for District 97. First, I want to thank Carrie and Brenna for organizing the Zoom panel the Louisiana Utility Watchdog Alliance for Affordable Energy. You all play vital roles to consumer protection in making sure that the public is aware of certain things that are going on with our utilities, our rates, our regulations in the state of Louisiana. So I'm very appreciative of everything that you do. As far as the information that you presented, not much of it was too new to me. So I'm aware of the challenges that we face. My main concern right now is that it's just becoming way too expensive to live here, especially if you're in New Orleans. So on top of those and look, this morning I had a legislative panel session with some of the senior citizens in the city of New Orleans, and utility rates was one of their biggest concerns. They lived on fixed incomes, and they said, when I have a spike in my bill because we had to purchase energy from somewhere else, it's tough on me, and I have to make difficult decisions on how I'm going to proceed and make financial in our young families and even some of our parents and grandparents. So these are big challenges that we have to face. From my perspective, I do what I can in Baton Rouge. I'm sure it won't be a surprise to any of you to find out that it's tough sometimes finding the votes to pass legislation that are going to be people-centric. I love Commissioner Lewis. We've worked together for the past 4 years, really on the Ways and Means Committee, trying to put forward legislation and tax policies that are people-centric and going to improve our state, right? And so that's another big concern of mine. And this is an election year, so definitely want to encourage and motivate everybody to get out there and vote. We have an election Saturday in New Orleans, but especially for the upcoming fall elections this year. And look, I want you to understand that you have a partner in me. I try to be boots on the ground in the city of New Orleans and throughout my district. And I love working with our community organizations. Last year, I was talking with the Alliance for Affordable Energy about a tax credit, a financial incentive program for solar plus battery storage, which is something that I think we could use and benefit from in the state of Louisiana. And so, you have me, whatever I can do to support your efforts, whatever we can do to prioritize the people of our state, please let me know. And then the last thing I'll just quickly say is our new commissioner is on top of his game. I sent him a text. I think it was 2 weeks ago, right? And I said, hey, is there something I can do at the state level to make sure that people with solar panels are receiving the credit that they should from the electricity generated? Because that was something that I wanted to pursue this session. And he said, well, it would need to start with PSC, and I'm certainly going to let you know if we need any legislative support or anything you can do at the state level. So I'm excited about this new chapter and look forward to your questions today. Thank you.
So we actually do have 2 questions. I'm going to go ahead and let Brenna go through those.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Lewis and Representative Willard. The first question is, let's see. What is the likelihood of publicly owned utilities? These private companies, time and time again, have shown they care more about profits than actually keeping the lights on.
I think that's a good big question. I will say I think the challenge is twofold. I think one of the things that we have at our advantage with a regulated monopoly is the amount of control that we can have on their earnings, on the rulemaking process, and others. But when we talk about, which I am a favor of, municipalization, which is publicly owned utilities, and we do have quite a few across this state, Plaquemine, Lafayette, Alexandria. These are other places that have their own. They work, but the challenge with this is a lot of times there are 3 things really in utility regulation that matters, and that is generation, how you are actually creating power, transmission, how you take the power you created and transmit it across a jurisdiction, and then distribution, which is what comes to your house. And the challenge that really publicly owned utilities faces, they don't have the capital to do all three. Most of the time, your publicly owned utility is either in generation and distribution. Transmission is probably the hardest. And so what happens is, even if you have a publicly owned utility, you still end up having to operate with a privately owned utility company, or an investor-owned utility, an IOU we call them, to actually have that. So for instance, there was a weather storm in my district in Plaquemine a few weeks ago, and Plaquemine Power stayed on. However, they could not keep power on people's houses because it was a Entergy transmission line, which means they had to wait for Entergy Louisiana to fix their transmission line, even though their power and their generation did not stop. And so while I think it is something we need to look at, this is really probably going to have to be part of a long-term transition in our way that we do utility, and something that probably would not be very practical to happen in the next few years.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I tend to agree with Commissioner Lewis. To give you a real life example for the city of New Orleans, right? We have Sewage and Water Board, which is kind of a quasi. It's a locally owned municipal entity, kind of state, kind of local entity. Every time we need money to improve the pumps, the pumping system, the turbines, any type of capital funding, we have to go to Baton Rouge for it. And oftentimes the city gets caught up in political games, and that funding could be held up or completely denied, which means the projects really can't go forward, or you have to look for other avenues to fund those projects. So if our utility companies went to municipally owned and operated, we would be caught up in a similar type of system like that. And so that is one of the reasons that I would kind of have heartburn and need to see more information and kind of a clear transition plan if that was a route that we wanted to take. And also, I mean, the burden to repair storm-related damage would kind of be the same. I mean, it would still fall on the municipality to get those distribution lines and anything that the poles that go down, and it has to be funded. So, you know, while you could put pressure on your city council members to say, hey, the public shouldn't pay this cost, the money has to come from somewhere. And so I really don't know if transitioning to municipal owned utilities is the best option out there. And again, I would really need to see more information and a clear transition plan on how we would like to proceed with that.
There's kind of a follow-up question to that. So I have a second question of adding renewables to the grid is going to be expensive in some cases, and we know it's going to be expensive. And this person would like to hear thoughts on innovative ideas that will support transition to renewables without burdening ratepayers. So we just talked about publicly owned utilities, but are there any other ideas? And she also says, in particular, I'm concerned about the cost of offshore wind energy becoming prohibitive to the point that most or all of that power goes to industry instead of communities.
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that's actually we are considering and talking about at the commission right now. We have a docket, which is kind of our way of legislation, if you say so. But the way that the Public Service Commission works is we typically open a docket, which is almost asking a question about policy, and then we do analysis, research, and then proposals come from that docket that then we then vote on. And so right now, we have what is called the consumer-centered options. And one of the places that we're looking at is what we call the green renewable option, which would allow some of the industrial users, so the people who use a lot of energy. So you're talking about a Marathon, a Chevron, a Shell, a Walmart, a Target, these big industrial consumers, having an option where they can purchase renewable energy, offshore wind, battery storage, at their own risk, that then they are co-generating power now, supplying that power back onto the grid, which then would help give us more capacity, but also keep where consumers, individuals like us, would not have to take on the cost of the renewable building options. And so this is an option that's on the table right now. We are actively looking at it and debating it. I think we'll be putting out a procedural schedule relatively soon about when we will make those decisions. And so this is a place where I think I would encourage and really my office will push to have people join in, because I think it's a very contentious argument right now. The investor-owned utilities do not want that, because quite frankly, if you're an investor-owned utility, you don't make any money if somebody else is producing power. So it's going to be a big fight at the commission, I think. But that is one of the ways that is being looked at, how you bring renewable energy on. And quickly, secondly, we're also looking at ways that community solar or rooftop solar can be a part of that. So one of the things that may require is going back into net metering and not only looking at how a rooftop solar panel only benefits a customer, but how if they have excess generation and power that they have produced, how that comes back onto the grid to then provide a cheaper, reliable rate for other people. And so I think this is going to be another topic we're going to see as community solar has taken across the nation, what that can do, not only in terms of providing power, but also the investments that it makes in our community. There was a local school district in Arkansas recently that was running about $175,000 deficit each year, invested in solar panels for all of the schools in the district, and they have turned that $175,000 deficit into a $1.8 million surplus that is now funding teacher pay raises. So we can look at energy not only as a way of reducing power, but building back the investments into our communities that we know are desperately needed.
I mean, again, I think Commissioner Lewis did a great job. I'm certainly looking forward to working with him on some of that stuff. So from a legislative perspective, and I do want to thank any of you if you've been involved with the Lighthouse Louisiana project. I think that's a great initiative, and I think it certainly deserves some attention from the state legislature and even some funding, because what we saw after Hurricane Ida and even the hurricanes in Southwest Louisiana is that, you know, some people who thought that maybe it was okay to stay because they had solar panels and they could still operate their homes were not in a position to do that because they did not have the battery storage component, which is something else that I think we need to focus on. People having solar panels to set up some type of policy that'll make the battery storage component more accessible and more affordable for them. So that is something that I think that we should be focused on. Like I spoke about earlier, when you do have the solar panels and you're selling electricity back into the grid, making sure that those homeowners are fairly compensated. I think that is another good initiative. And the reason I bring that up is because when I go to my neighborhood associations and people talk to me about their issues, they'll say, you know, I had these solar panels put on my home. Some of them use the incentive program that we used to have on the books, which, you know, I really wish we could still have on the books, but some of them use that to get the solar panels, and they say their utility bills used to be lower and they used to get a bigger credit for it. And now it's, you know, some months they won't get any credit, nothing. And some months maybe they'll get a negligible amount. So that's something else that I think we should be looking at. Two other things. One, I haven't figured out how to do it. So if anybody on this call wants to try to help me for a future session, as far as the building industry, the construction industry, I think there's some programs that we could put on the books to encourage developers and even realtors to construct properties, both residential and commercial, with materials that are more friendly to green infrastructure, like permeable surfaces and whatnot, and catch basins and all of that. So, you know, I don't like going to a financial incentive as my first move, but outside of that, I haven't really thought of any other ways to kind of make that popular in the state of Louisiana. But I think that's an initiative that would not only get, the Alliance for Affordable Energy excited, but also I think it would get the construction industry somewhat excited about it. And then the last thing, just electric vehicles. One of the challenges living in Louisiana and owning an electric vehicle is the shortage of those EV charging stations throughout the state. So I'm happy that we did get a good pot of money from the Build Back Better legislation out of DC to set up some electric vehicle charging stations throughout the state, because that is something that we are far behind on. But beyond that, if we could get some of our local governments to get behind electrification of their fleets, that is something that could have really good results for our state as far as cutting down emissions. I was trying to work with the city of New Orleans on that a year or two ago, and it kind of petered out, but it's something that I do plan to bring back. And I know the city is trying to make that transition. But I think that is another good initiative, because our local governments use so many vehicles. I mean, talking about utility trucks, talking about vehicles that some city workers get. You're looking at garbage trucks, all of those 18-wheelers, all of those, if we transition those to electric vehicles, could have a good reduction in emissions for the state of Louisiana. Not what we need for sure, but it'll certainly help.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Lewis and Representative Willard, for taking time to address those questions. We do have a few other questions, but we have a community dialogue planned for the end of this meeting. So I would like to now bring the group's attention to a way that they can help us today. Let me go ahead and share my screen once again. So as you can see, we have an easy QR code you can scan for our petition. And on our petition, you will have more information, but it is essentially the same information you've gotten here today, saying that that you agree with what we're saying and that you would like to work with our commission and legislature to improve this system. And of course, another way to help is to follow both the Louisiana Utility Watchdog and the Alliance for Affordable Energy on social media. That's how we keep everyone up to date on things even outside of our organization. So go ahead and perhaps screenshot that. But we excitedly already have 126 signatures to our petition. This just helps our elected representatives also know what their constituents are agreeing or not agreeing with. So I will have this up again at the end of our meeting, but we would like to now move on to our community dialogue, and I'm going to let Brenna tell you how we would like that to proceed.
Thanks, Carrie.
One moment, Brenna. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, I will also be dropping the link to the petition in the chat. All yours, Brenna.
Thank you. Yeah, so for the rest of our meeting today, we have about a little over 15 minutes until 2 p.m. For the time allocated. We're going to have just an open community dialogue. I'd like for this to, remain respectful and productive. And for this section, I'm going to open up my screen. Hold on one moment. For this section, I am going to keep an eye on everyone in the chat, and you can raise your hand if you have a question. I do want to start off with a couple questions that we had left over from right after the presentation. We'll start with that, and then I will just take questions from the general group if you just raise your hand in the chat, and I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself. But the first questions that were left over from earlier for Commissioner Lewis and Representative Willard, what does affordable energy for all mean to you? And what could be changed at the Public Service Commission to ensure accountability at the commission?
Yeah, I mean, I guess affordable energy to me means, I think there are three standards that people's lights stay on, people's lights come on, and people can afford to keep their lights on. And that is a big debate that I think oftentimes is left. I recently was just appointed on the National Utility Regulators Commissioners Committee on Consumer Protection to highlight these issues, because that's been one of the problems. I think oftentimes we're not talking, Sarah, enough about these costs. I mean, I think the question earlier about solar is are renewable energies is well taken. And oftentimes we're just like, oh, great, this is amazing science. It's a clean way to go. Let's just do it. Not recognizing that doing that still would add to people's bills, because someone has to cover the cost of the production of it. And so, I mean, I think the things that we have to change at the Public Service Commission is something that I've said in day one, is we have to get public participation back. We need to look at ways where we can allow the public to intervene in the dockets that we have. I know I talked earlier about dockets and those resources, but you have to pay to actually put your voice into the equation of a rule that we're debating. So if you are, the Alliance does it, but if you want to intervene into a case about renewable energy or making solar panels more affordable, you have to put up money to say, hey, I want my voice heard and my opinion taken into consideration of the rule. And so I think we need to look at a way to have public interventions where people can intervene in the dockets as the proceedings are going on, and not simply just reacting to whatever final decision that has been made. And so those are some of the places that I'm looking at, hopefully that we can make some changes. But it's also, lastly, working more closely with the legislature. One of the things that we did at the commission, I thought it was great, was during COVID, we put on a moratorium of utility disconnections. However, no one at the commission worked with the legislature to appropriate some of the federal funds to it. So guess what's happening now? All of the utility companies are coming back and asking for recovery for all of the money that they lost from utility shutoffs. And it's being put right back on the ratepayers, because we didn't have that coordination as they were appropriating American Rescue dollars to say, hey, can you put some money aside so that we can pay off these utility bills that were ran up during our moratorium during COVID when people lost work. So now people are going to be paying, your bills are higher now every year because of those recovery. And so those are ways I think we need to make some changes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's great that they had the moratorium on shutoffs, right? It was crucially needed, but the process wasn't thought through fully. So thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner. Affordable energy means a bill that you'll get every month that won't break the bank, a bill that you get every month that has some predictability to it. My energy bill for the last month was like $300 and something, like out of the blue. And some people just can't prepare for that. So I think there needs to be more predictability and more stability in the way that utility companies are charging consumers. And flexibility, I suppose, flexibility, because it should not put you in a situation where you have to say, all right, well, I'm going to cut down on what I spend at the grocery this month, or, I won't fully pay off my credit card bill this month. I really don't think utilities should be putting people in those tough predicaments. It's one of those things living in Louisiana. You need You need an air conditioner because it gets very hot during the spring, summer, and fall. And you need heating because sometimes we have those cold snaps. And I think that's something that really should be viewed as a commodity. I mean, there's only a handful of things that you really need to thrive in life. And I think stability and utility bills is one thing. So for me, affordability looks like something that, you can afford on a month-to-month basis, that won't break the bank, and that has no real big surprises. And I think we can all work together to achieve that.
Thanks, y'all. So obviously we need more time for a fully hashed out dialogue, and we're hoping to schedule more events like this on these issues. But we'd love to hear briefly from others. So we're gonna, there were a few more questions that were populated from the link, but we'd like to open it up to dialogue right now. If anyone has any comments or questions about how leaders across branches of government and people joining this call, what we can do to move forward. I do see Miss Marianne Mushat, your hand is raised, so I'll let you unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, the first one is, I know, like to let your voice be heard to your state senator, your state rep, and federal, representatives. You can write letters, you can call them, and because they're elected by us, we have that pull. But for commissioners, well, I guess we elect you, but what's the best way to influence or talk with and try and convince commissioners, like Commissioner Scarmetta is my commissioner, like to suss him out on how he feels about renewable energy or clean energy, towards changing his opinion on the feasibility. And then I know the net metering report of 2017, I think, was written by Mr. Dismukes, who is a known opponent of renewable energy. How is there any way to redress that so that at least a neutral party could, conduct the report? I know that's before your time, but because you're new, do you see any way of readdressing that?
Yeah, so I'll answer both of your questions really quickly. I think the first one is we have the same type of contact information that the legislative have. I mean, I think part of the problem is the commission has been built where you're only supposed to call if it's a consumer complaint and not necessarily an issue-based conversation. I know for my office, we put my email on the commission's website, as well as our office phone and as well as my constituent phone. I can't say that is the case for the remaining commissioners. And so I think the best way right now, honestly, is either calling their office or calling some of the staff or their emails that are listed and asking those questions. To your second point is, this is part of the problem at sometimes at the commission is that a lot of our work is outsourced. We are a underfunded agency. One of the things I don't know if people know is none of your tax dollars actually fund the Louisiana Public Service Commission. Our budget is solely based off of fines, fees, and inspection rates that the regulated entities pay. That is to make it reasonable, it's a relatively small budget. And one of the things that we do because of that is we outsource to consultants. We go through mostly an RFP process, but it is a vote. And right now we've not been able to, I think sometimes, and I'm looking at this right now, we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, I want to say, where majority of our agenda was hiring consultants. I mean, there was just some information that was just not given. For instance, we voted on a consultant to do cybersecurity work who had been disbarred, and no one had put that in any of the records for me, or that he had personal ties and business dealings with a fellow commissioner. And so that is one of the challenges, is that we have to create a more transparent process of collecting information, not only about what you say you're going to do in responding to a request for proposal, but also some of the background knowledge of maybe the work that you've already previously done and issues. And so that's a way that we can do it. I am working to rehash and bring back net metering, and I will probably have a directive very soon, probably looking more at the early fall, and making us have that conversation again. But those are just some of the kind of institutional challenges that have bottled up. And I think one of the things I think Representative Willard would agree with me on is the way you really make changes, you got to really kind of understand these rules. And so I've been taking the time to really understand how our processes work, because the one way that they will trip up a good piece of policy is a procedural hurdle or some analysis or review that you didn't think through. And so we've really spent time going through our rules and procedures to understand how everything becomes a policy. So then as we propose it, we do it in a way that actually can make it happen.
Thank you. I see, excuse me, Reverend Vanderweel, your hand was raised next.
Yes, I thank you so much for this presentation. My question is the fact that every person, pet, and plant on Earth relies on the Earth for the opportunity to live. How come we as people don't form up policies to reflect the need to protect our Earth as being as important as whether my dog is sneezing or the butterflies are dying?
Yeah,
And until we do that, won't it be hard to convince people of a need that to protect the planet as our source of life, rather than something to be used and abused?
Yeah, I mean, that question reminds me, I don't know if any of you have seen the meme of the little dog drinking coffee with the house on fire saying everything is fine. You know, what I can say from my legislative experience is that oftentimes members have connections to certain businesses in certain industries, and it creates, I don't want to say an inherent conflict, but it complicates matters. And so many times they're put in a position, it's not difficult for me. I mean, if you know me or pay attention to how I vote in the legislature, I vote for what I believe is right, and I vote against what I believe is wrong. But a lot of times balancing that, right, the needs of industry and business versus the needs of our environment and our planet can sometimes be difficult for certain members. It's not for me. It's, you know, kind of white and black for me. And so I think that's a big problem. If you look at some of the programs that are supported by our state, one of our largest financial incentive programs, the industrial tax exemption program, directly contributes to climate change and coastal erosion and pollution and elevated risks of cancer throughout our state. And that says a lot about a state if your main program, your main economic development program is creating all of those problems. And at the same time, we really do very little to support our small businesses and our people. And I don't see how anyone could disagree with that. So, you know, it's tough sometimes, it really is. But at the end of the day, I think it boils down to elections. It really does. I mean, it boils down to elections. I've seen some crazy races where, you know, the incumbent running has done everything to not get reelected, and money puts them back into that seat. And so elections have consequences, and I think that's kind of what we're dealing with as a state. A lot of, especially in the legislature, you know, you have a lot of people who've been there for so long. Is it wise to expect something different? You know?
Thank you, Representative Willard. In respecting everyone's time, we only have a couple more minutes, and I have 2 more hands raised. So I'd like to go on to Hannah Martell. Your hand was raised next if you wanted to ask your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brenna. Good afternoon. So my question is specifically for Commissioner Lewis. aside from maybe changing the metering system, what are some other changes that could be made at the LPSC to ensure that the LPSC is held accountable?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, it is we have to probably tackle our campaign finance rules. I mean, here's the funny thing that I tell people at the PSC, we have a strong rule about accepting nothing of value. So if I come to your office and you have bought a case of Dasani water, you're not actually, by our technicality of our rule, not eligible to give me that bottle of water. However, I could walk out of that room and take a $5,000 check from you. And so that seems to be a little bit of a convoluted rule. So I think, it is kind of cleaning up who is donating and contributing to our campaigns. But secondly, it's about opening our process up to the public. My first meeting, I asked the room if you were to raise your hand if you were not a regulated entity, a lobbyist for a regulated entity, or a lawyer representing a regulated entity. The room had about 100 and maybe 30 people in there, and there were 3 hands that raised up. And so if we want to talk about accountability, we have to be better at communicating what we're doing to people, but then also making sure the process is open and engaged for people. I mean, just to be honest with you, we did not have live streaming of a PSC meeting until COVID. So think about that. In 2020, there was not a live stream option to watch the Louisiana Public Service Commission. And then when we did it, it was solely Zoom. Now we have moved to recording it on YouTube. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of just transparency, sunlight work that can be done. So you know what is there. I mean, I can't tell you how many people ask me, what is the Public Service Commission? Because they don't even know. So how can you hold me accountable if you don't even know I exist?
And I have to say, he is very approachable.
Absolutely.
So do not be intimidated to approach Commissioner Lewis with a question.
Absolutely. Well said, Commissioner Lewis, and thank you so much also to Representative Willard. It is 2:00. I know people may need to run to their next meetings. I just wanted to make sure that we do have one more hand raised, but Commissioner Lewis, Representative Willard, thank you so much for joining us for today. If you need to jump off, we'll understand, but we can hang out for anybody who wants to continue the discussion for a little while longer. And if you do need to leave, feel free to say so.
I can stay on for another 5 minutes or so.
Excellent. Well, let's make the most of it then.
Okay, thanks, y'all. I do see one more hand raised. The account name is Bunny Friend Neighborhood. If you'll unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Catherine Prevost, and I live in the Upper Ninth Ward. And my question is, how do we make the utility companies more responsible for damages instead of giving it to us on our utility bill? We have to pay insurance for anything that we have. Why don't they have the same thing so that we don't have to pay for their equipment in their damages?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think one of the challenges that we at the commission and the city council, I should preface, especially in New Orleans, it's actually the most unique utility regulation of anywhere in the world, because most of the time a municipality or a city or state or city or local government is regulating a utility that they actually own. New Orleans is the only place in the world where a local government actually regulates a privately owned, investor-owned utility corporation. So I just want to, before I give the answer, kind of make sure that that division is clear. One of the challenges is, though, that we as regulators probably have to be better at ensuring maintenance and upkeep. So when you have a investor-owned utility or a regulated monopoly, they are entitled by law, by the Constitution, to make what is called a just and reasonable profit. Now, as my law students would tell you, that's probably where the debate is what is just and what is reasonable. However, one of the challenges has become is that we haven't done, in my opinion, a great job of assessing the damages outside of one item, whether or not damages occurred. And so if the utility company comes and says, hey, look, all of my poles are on the ground, I need full recovery cost. We say, oh, hey, that is true. You're entitled to a profit. Here you go. However, I believe that there should be a stronger test. If that utility pole should have been replaced 30 years ago, and it is broken now in Hurricane Ida, I believe the only thing that is just and reasonable is the market fair value of a 30-year-old utility pole, not the value of a brand new constructed pole that you are now asking to be put on. And I think that is the give and take where we have to be stronger, is holding them more accountable to maintenance. Because for me, it's you may see this, especially in Louisiana, where I think we're getting to a point where the utility company is saying, I probably don't need to really fix these things because I know a storm's going to hit it at one point, and I'm going to have the recovery cost handled over here rather than taking it out of my operational budget. And that, I think, is going to be a significant problem. And that's one of the issues at why rates are so higher in New Orleans than the rest of the state. So when Entergy Louisiana's equipment in Lake Charles goes down, ratepayers in Shreveport and Baton Rouge are contributing to those costs, as well as Lake Charles.
Yeah.
However, in the city of New Orleans, it is a much smaller population, right? And we're talking about maybe 350,000 customers at the most who now will cover those damages. And so that relationship between Entergy New Orleans and Entergy Louisiana also exacerbates it, because anytime Entergy New Orleans faces a crisis, there's only a small subsection of people that they can actually recover that cost from. And so we have to really look at our auditing process. We have to look at our independent monitoring process, and we have to look at maintenance and upkeep, because if we don't do that, then we're back into the situation where the utility company says, by law, I recover my costs, so you have to give it to me, and our hands ends up being tied.
Nothing
Well-
to add. That was great.
Nothing to add, Representative Willard? Well, then I think this is a great time to go ahead and close our meeting since we don't have any more hands up. I want to thank everyone for attending and participating. And I want to especially thank our special guests, Commissioner Lewis and Representative Willard. I want to also thank the Alliance for Affordable Energy for giving us this platform and support to make this community dialogue possible in the first place. This has been a very productive and valuable start to a dialogue that we should continue long after this meeting. And as a reminder, you can support us today by signing our petition. The link is in the chat still and on our social media to stay up to date. And lastly, keep an eye on your email for a follow-up that will address any questions we may not have had the time to get to, and give you a little bit of a summary of what we went over today. So on behalf of both my partner, Brenna, and I, we thank you so much for your support and attention.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Y'all take care.
Take care.
You too.
Thank you all so much. Have a great day.